Hi everyone, and we've got a nice view today on the way to Elvingham in Lincolnshire, and it's a sunrise. So what I've done is a very basic line drawing, just about half and half, slightly more land than sky, and then just have an idea of where your trees are going to go in here. I've mixed up some colours. So the first one I've got is Gamboge Yellow. Now the Gamboge Yellow I've got is old style Gamboge Yellow, and it's not got any green in. So if you've got one of the Gamboge hues that's a bit more greener, then I want you to use something different, like a cadmium yellow, because it will be a much warmer yellow and work better in a sunset. I've got Permanent Rose, Cerulean Blue, Intense Blue or Windsor Blue Red shade, and Indigo. So a few different colours today. So I'm going to come on. It's a bit overcast here today, so there's a bit more shadow in the room. So hopefully you haven't got a big shadow and not being able to see anything else. So we're going to come all the way to the horizon line. So you're going to ignore your tree trunks. Just come straight over them with water. And you can come over that very distant land as well, that you can see. Sort of trees on the horizon. Just come all the way over that. Make sure you give it a nice coat of water. There's quite a few colours going into this, so you want to give yourself plenty of time. Okay, so I'm starting with my Gamboge or cadmium yellow. I'm going to bring that in first. So there's a nice portion of light to this right hand side. So I want you to try and capture that by leaving it white, or the colour of the paper. Bring this yellow across. Make sure you rinse your brush really well in between the colours. The next one I'm picking up is a rose, and I'm going to start to this left hand side because that's more rose than peach, and then I'm going to bring it through this yellow. And then as I bring it through the yellow, it's going to go much peachier. Just pick up a little amount at a time so you don't obliterate the yellow and you get that peachy tone. Now it's really important that we get some of this rose around this area at the top, because we're going in with the blues. And if you remember, blue and yellow make green, and we don't really get green in skies. So by using this little bit of rose, that's going to stop that happening. So it's really important you're getting that level of rose towards the top. Even if you take a little bit more in than you think. Rinse my brush out again. So I'm coming into the cerulean blue now. It's all quite wispy. You want to leave a few little bits of white. So this is where that really bright blue is. So the cerulean blue is semi-opaque, so it will stay put. Rinse my brush out, and then into the intense blue. So any sort of phthalo shade has a tendency to shoot, so it's going to move quite quickly across the paper. So make sure you're not loaded your brush up too much. And bring some of this through. Remember, you're not touching that yellow. And then lastly, I'm coming into the indigo. So it's a bit of a different colour combination today. And just sweeping this through. You want it nice and dark in this corner. There's quite a lot of blue in indigo, so again, you're not coming up to that yellow. You don't want to make the green, you're just staying in the peachy colour. If you want any really bold bits, just pick a little bit up neat on the brush. That will move quite nicely and darkly. Just get a little bit more neat there. Get that nice and bold. Okay. I'm just going to let that settle. With any sort of phthalo pigment, if you try and come in to dry that, it always fades, so I'm going to try and let that dry naturally. So I'm just bringing a little bit of water onto the road area. This is because I just want to get a little bit of cerulean blue where these puddles are. So it doesn't matter if you get more on, because the road is darker. You just want that little bit where those puddles are. Okay, I'll dry that off. Okay, so that's all dried off nicely. So I'm going to do a layer on the bottom. I'm going to do a couple of bits first. What I've done is I've mixed up a green that's using the intense blue that I'd used in the sky and adding some gamboge to it. So I've got a nice dark green there ready. So I've got a little bit of a wax crayon. You can use a wax candle. And what I want to do is just bring that on these blue areas, and what I'm hoping to achieve is wax resist, which will mean the puddles will stay light. So I'm hitting where the blue areas are. Try to use a variety of strokes so that you're getting the shapes of the puddles, and do horizontal lines where it's bigger, because that gives the surface of the road. Hopefully that makes sense. It will make sense when you come to paint it and see what you've done. It's always really hard with wax to know whether you've got enough on, so you're just a little bit hoping for the best, but let's hope we've got enough. The other way to approach it is to use oil pastels. So I've got some oil pastels lying around. I appreciate not all of you will have oil pastels lying around. What you could do is paint yellow where the daffodils are on either side of the road, and then do the same wax candle technique that I've just done on the road. Or you could mask some daffodils out and then paint them yellow after. So you could do it with watercolor. You could do the same with the road if you haven't got the wax candle to do that. Or you could use a bit of acrylic or some pastel, like normal pastels, over the top if you want to. So I'm just doing it a little bit different today. So I'm going to come in. So this is just a nice warm yellow. I am not going, that's a daffodil and I'm doing the daffodil shape. I am working so that I just create some texture. So you're just dotting this oil pastel on. You want to get bigger as you come towards the foreground. So you've got bigger marks here. Again, it could be anything. They're very dotty marks rather than it looking like a daffodil. And then I've gone very lightly over this side just to create some shapes that replicate daffodils over that side. I'm picking up a creamy coloured oil pastel or an ochre coloured oil pastel now, and just into this area, just here on the photograph, there's quite a lot of brambly bits that are lighter, so I'm going to pop some in just with squiggles. Just so I've got that relief happening there as well. So that's just a few squiggles. Okay, so I'm going to bring the water over all the way across for this first layer. Again, plenty of water. Okay, so I'm going to start with this green. Because it's got that phthalo pigment in, it'll really shoot. And bring the same over here. Just give my brush a really good rinse. I'm going to come in with a little bit of yellow, just where it's a bit lighter. This is just a base, remember, you don't have to get everything in at this stage. And a little bit of yellow going up that way as well. Just going to capture a little bit. So I've got a tiny bit of green mix that's happened on the brush, but that's working really nicely to fade this in. So I'm just going to continue with it. Rinse my brush out. I'm coming in with a rose. You might be looking at this thinking there's no rose in here. This is a base colour. There's quite a lot of warmth in it, so hence why I want the base colour to appear through. And pop some rose this side as well. Don't worry about those colours mixing together. It all adds to the effect. Make sure you're breaking this line up so that it's not too straight there. I'm going to come into the indigo. spread this across the road. Remember, horizontal strokes for a flat surface. Bringing these edges down just to define those a little bit more. And pick up a little bit of the rose back in there. And a few dabs in here as well. Now, if you think about your complementary colours, rose and green will make a very nice brown. So that's what we're going to do in a second. Mix them a little bit on the paper. Okay, so I'm going to bring this, this is a dab of the green into this rose, and it's going to darken that. And the same this side. Pick up a little bit more rose if it's not brown enough. Okay, and then I'm just going to come along this horizon line with a little bit of rose. You don't need to worry about the detail of the trees at this stage. So that very sort of distant hazy bit we're not doing yet. And then I'm dabbing into my indigo. I haven't rinsed the brush in between. I'm keeping that. It's always one of the hardest things to do a straight line. I want that to look quite dark on the horizon. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Just slightly come down this darker line anyway. So it should give a really nice sort of silhouetted feel just in the distance. Whilst it's still damp, I'm just coming in with a few little bits of dark, so just to define this a little bit more. Especially these edges. Now my wax hasn't worked greatly well. There's always a balance of knowing how much you've put on and doing too much and too little. I've got a little bit too little, so I might have to go back in with a bit of an oil pastel later. So this is just giving more surface and definition to the road. I'm looking for those dark shadows. Just pulling that through. Okay, I'll dry that one off. Okay, so I've popped a little bit more oil pastel just on the road, just so that I've got a little bit more of a reflection of water. I've just used a very light blue on there. What I've done as well is I've mixed a bit of my rose and a bit of my green together, so that I've got a sort of plummy colour. And that's what I'm going to use to come into the background to create those distant tree line. Okay, so I'm just taking on a little bit of water just where the trees are. I'm using a number 6 to do that. So far I've used a number 10 for everything, apart from a water brush. Doesn't have to be exact. Just looking for an impression of, and then I'm going to come in with some of this colour. Now I really want to let some of that peachy colour still show through, so concentrate on getting the top edge and then just letting it spread. You know, you'll still get little bits of the peachy bit showing through. Use the tip of the brush to create these trees that you can see on the horizon. So that the line's not too smooth. And then I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, once that's dry, with the side of the brush, so I've loaded it up with that same colour, I'm just going to create some dry brush marks. I've got it right on the side, and these are for the trees that we can see in the very distance. So keep it nice and flat, and you'll just catch the surface of the paper. And then with a line writer or rigger, stuck. Just turn upside down. You can always turn your photo reference upside down as well. These are tiny trees in the background anyway. I just want you to run some trunks and a few branches whilst it's still damp, so it'll blend together nicely. If you can't see exactly what's there, just make something up. As long as there's a few branches, it'll work. Okay, and I'm going to dry that one off. And there's a couple of areas that just look a little bit darker and denser. So I'm just, with a number 6 in that same colour, I'm just going to pull out onto dry a couple of those areas, just so it gives a bit of variety. If you come over the trees that you've already done, don't worry. So I'm just picking up those areas that are a little bit darker. It's also grounding those trees that I've done in the distance as well. Okay, I'm still using that browny plummy mix. I'm just going to wet this brown area this side, coming down to my green line. And then just bringing in a little bit more, just so that I'm getting a little bit more definition. And a bit more depth. I'm going to do the same this side. This side it comes right the way up to that dark horizon line. Just needs that little bit more depth in these layers. I'm using plenty of water, plenty of paint. Just keeping it nice and gentle so I don't lift the layers underneath. Again, coming down to that green edge. I'm going to give my brush a little rinse out, pick up a little bit of clean water, and I'm just going to touch this edge in places. So I'm wetting further so that the paint can flow a little bit and I don't get that hard edge. If you miss a couple of bits, that's really nice because you'll get these lost and found edges. Okay, so I haven't dried those areas off. What I'm going to do now is come in with some green and break into those edges. So this is onto the dry area where the daffodils are, but going into the wet area. So they get a nice shooting effect and it'll give a softness and it'll look like it's pushing into that area, which is what I want. So the paint's nice and thick. It's that lovely green colour. I'm working it over the daffodils. I'm rinsing my brush. I'm going to pick up some water, just dab it off a little bit, and then just come over this side with a little bit of water, and that will just soften that in. And then I'm going to do the same this side. So pick up some nice thick green. You don't want to eliminate all of the lighter green, so you don't come too far down that you eliminate that. You're just breaking into that line, that darker plummy line with the thick green. And then I'll rinse my brush off, dab into some water and just wet along here. Okay, I'll dry that one off. Okay, so I'm going to come over the road again now. So I'm going to drop a little bit of water on. Doesn't matter if you don't get quite near the edges, because you're going to need that definition there anyway. And then I'll just pop some water in my indigo, because I've got a new blob in here. And we're coming over again with the indigo. So start from the middle, horizontal strokes so that you're creating that surface. Those layers from underneath will still show through. This is to give a lot more depth. Okay, so I'm coming down this edge. And pull those horizontal strokes from that edge. It's a bit at the back, there's not too much water on this. You want this little bit of definition on these edges now, so that the road stands out. Remember not to eliminate all of that light green on the side. And then that pull through horizontal stroke motion just creates the surface of the road again. I want to bring a little bit more paint around your puddles, because that always grounds them really well. If it's dispersing, then you just need to give it a second and come back on when it's dried a little bit. Okay, I'll dry that off. Okay, so I've dried that one off. I've got some of my green again, and I'm just going to, with my round number 10, do some brush strokes through in this front section just to replicate some of the daffodil leaves. So you just want them to arch over a little bit. Nothing too precise. It's just giving it that little bit more definition just on that edge. And then I'm just going to do just a little bit underneath this side. So just make sure you're breaking up that edge so it's not too straight. I'm using the tip of the brush downwards so that I'm creating a similar effect to sweeping over that side without much effort. I can't do individual ones over this side because it's too far away. You wouldn't see individual ones, but you have got that little bit extra definition there. Just dabbing a little bit higher. Okay. Turned upside down, I always find it easier to do trees this way. I'm going to start with this big one here. I've turned the picture upside down as well, and this is just indigo on my brush, so I always start with my round number 10, go as long as I can with that, and then I'll go to my number 6, and then I'll go to my line writer or rigger. So I'm really loaded with paint. This is just indigo. You always get a much nicer point on a tree branch if you paint downwards. Well, I always do. So I'll go as long as I can with my number 6. And then line writers under there. You're just going to keep flowing. Again, it's an impression of, it doesn't have to be exact. Depends how much patience you've got. Remember to overlap some. When you've got the main base on, you can dry this off and then keep coming back in. It doesn't have to all be done wet. You should be able to get thinner and thinner as you work your way up and out. You want a few to come down a little bit, but not too many. There's some nice little wiggly bits down at the bottom as well. This is still absolutely loaded with paint, which makes it nice and easy. I'm just going to show you one tree so you know what you're doing, and then the other two trees are exactly the same. So it's like a little Y at the end of a branch. And just keep going, and then when I turn around this way, so I'm going to do each tree individually, I just want you to look for the shadow, and with a damp brush, this is my damp number 6, I'm just going to pull that in. So this grounds the tree, stops it floating. It can also create a little bit of shadow. The shadow will go this way because the sun is there. But I want you to ground it both ways, but focus on getting the shadow to go the other way. Now what you can see happening here is that I've got lots and lots of paint and it's running down. So with a clean damp brush, I'm just removing some of it to stop it running and creating that hard line again. So I don't want that to happen at the bottom. If with a damp brush I can actually just lift a little bit out, and I'll create a little bit of a light and dark edge there. You can probably see that if I come in a little bit. So I've just lifted a little bit out on that right hand side. You can see it's just created that shadow. So I'm going to dry that one off and do the other two trees in exactly the same way. And there we go, all finished. So this tree I've mainly used a number 10 and then used a little bit of a 6 and my line writer or rigger. This one I've just done with my line writer, this one at the back. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you're looking and thinking, oh, these need to be a little bit more yellow, or the daffodils, or you want a little bit more lighting, then play around. You can use a bit of acrylic, you can use oil pastels, you can use normal pastels, use a bit of gouache if you've got that, a bit of acrylic ink if you've got that as well. It's a little bit of an experimental one today. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you next week. Bye.